Started. My name is Alexis Whittam. I'm the Director of Communications for the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. Welcome to our education series for 2023. We do these every month-ish, not quite every month, on a different topic as related to homelessness, and we bring in experts both from our organization, the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and other Colorado organizations making a difference in combating homelessness. Tonight, we're talking about alternatives to shelter. So really those options outside of what a lot of folks typically think of as how folks who are experiencing homelessness are sheltered and receive services. And we want to dive into what those options are and some of the creative ways that organizations have been responding, particularly in the last few years as the landscape has changed. So of course, we always want to start with housekeeping, going over some basic information about our session. There is live captioning available. So if you go down to the bottom bar, you should be able to hit the CC button and select show subtitle. If you're having trouble, just put in the chat and someone can help you with the process for that. But we want to make sure this is accessible and that you can have access to what everyone's saying. Our agenda for today, what we're doing, this one's panel style. So sometimes we have a panel, sometimes we have more of presentations, but today we're doing a panel, which means we're gonna have a little introduction with a little background on our topic, alternatives to shelter. We'll do about 45 minutes with our panelists who are local experts, and then we will go ahead and have a Q&A at the end using your questions. That means that everyone who isn't a panelist here today is essentially can use the chat to chat with each other, but if you have questions, you put it in the Q&A box. You'll be camera off if you're anyone who isn't a panelist, but that doesn't mean you can't participate. So please be in the chat, introduce yourself, talk to each other. Our staff here at CCH, the wonderful people helping with this session, will be providing resources in the chat, so keep your eye on it. But if you have any questions for our panelists, please do hit the Q&A button because sometimes the chat goes pretty quickly. We don't want to miss anything. So we know we'll get to the ones that are in the Q&A section. The session is being recorded, just to tell everyone that, so just so that's on your radar. And then we generally record these, we put it on YouTube the following day, usually by the afternoon. So if you want to hear something again, check it out tomorrow. If you want to share with anyone, check out our YouTube page tomorrow. And also we usually share the next day, we will share our presentation. So don't feel the need to take extensive notes. Everything will be here and available in the future, so you can just kind of be present. If you're a social media person, we are at CO Coalition, and then at CO Village. CO is the Colorado Village Collaborative. So our lovely Shannon Webster, who's our digital communications manager, will be posting some of the key takeaways from tonight. But if you want to post anything, please use those handles. So basically what we do is we like to do a data overview, and we like to just set the stage and make sure everyone's on the same page and has at least some knowledge coming into our conversation. So today we're going to just about 5-minute presentation. We're going to talk about sheltered versus unsheltered homelessness, the homelessness landscape in Colorado and Denver. So just what the numbers look like. Some reasons why individuals choose alternatives to shelter, and then some of the dangers of living unsheltered. So when we talk about sheltered versus unsheltered, this is very broadly what we mean. A sheltered person resides in an emergency shelter or transitional supportive housing for people who were previously sleeping rough or in emergency shelters, usually. So this is, when someone says someone's going to shelter, this is usually what they mean. It's a space. Often a shelter is sort of a large space. It's sometimes a crowded space. It's sometimes a big shared space for people. Unsheltered essentially is somebody who's residing in a place not meant for human habitation, such as cars, parks, sidewalks, abandoned buildings on the street. These are basically the HUD definitions, the Housing and Urban Development definitions that we're using here. And according to HUD, in 2022, there were about 582,000 people nationally who were experiencing homelessness on a single night in January. That's based on the point in time or PIT count. We estimate the actual number is probably about 3 times higher because the PIT count system is an imperfect system, but it gives us a good starting point to have on our radar as we jump into talking about a little bit more locally. So in Colorado, we estimate the number to be between 10,000 and 53,000. That 10,000 number is the PIT count number in Colorado. Once again, there's a lot of flaws in the system. It's volunteer-led. There's rural areas where the count isn't happening well. There's a bunch of people who just wouldn't be captured. If you're in jail, if you're in the hospital, if you're doubled up, if you're couch surfing, doubled up meaning like two families in one house that isn't big enough for two families, someone sort of between housing and crashing. None of that's going to be counted. So we think some of these other numbers are likely more accurate. The students experiencing homelessness reported in the 2020 to 2021 school year is 15,374. People who are accessing homelessness services in Colorado is about 32,000. So that's where we get that 3 times PIT number generally. And then if you look at individuals without stable housing covered by Medicaid in 2019, you'll get 53,000. It's also, none of these are going to be exactly right. You know, we're counting a moment in time, and people are going in and out of homelessness all the time and having different experiences. So a count in January doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with what's happening in November, right? For Metro Denver, that's a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight and the organizations that are here tonight. So you'll see that that point in time count is 6,884 in that kind of mint green. So Andrew, I think you're sharing now. If you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So yes, our sheltered count, it is the highest number of individuals. So of course it says in this little did you know box from HMIS that some people are enrolled in more than one project type. So obviously some of these are dual or even triple and have crossover, but there's a very large number of people sheltered, but there's also a number of people unsheltered. That's over 7,000 that HMIS in the Denver metro area believes to be unsheltered. Next slide, please. Great. So, you know, obviously what we think works best here at the coalition and what data shows works best is permanent housing opportunities, that no one should be unsheltered or sheltered. Everyone should have permanent supportive housing opportunities. Using a housing first model is the most effective way. That essentially, if you get people housing, everything else will start to come together generally. Data shows that person will have improved health outcomes. They'll have fewer trips to the hospital, fewer interactions with law enforcement. But unfortunately, wait lists for permanent supportive housing are incredibly long. They're usually 18 to 24 months long. And there's often people who get vouchers for housing, for temporary housing, and they actually just, there's nowhere to use them. There just simply are not enough units that allow for people to get into housing at this point. So even if someone is doing everything right, they're going through every process, it is very hard for them to get into permanent supportive housing rather quickly once they're unstable or experiencing homelessness. And the coalition does operate 21 properties. So we house over 4,000 people per night through the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, about half of those at our properties, which are permanent supportive housing, where you're going to have case manager integration, support services for people. And the other half are through the vouchers that our departments work with. But unfortunately, having done this for almost 40 years, we're still not able to counter what is happening in terms of homelessness. And if you want to know more about like how the affordable housing crisis has had an impact on homelessness, please check out last month's session where we did Homelessness 101 or our new report on affordable housing. Andrew, can you go to the next slide? Great. So why would someone choose to be unsheltered? These are all taken from the amazing Kevin Raleigh, who did our November session. And we asked this at our November session, and that was sort of the inspiration for having this session now here in April, was that we were doing a winter homelessness session. And so Kevin, who I think is here, shout out, was asked, why do people, especially in winter, especially when it's incredibly cold, why would people be unsheltered? So I went back and I watched the video and I wrote down some of the reasons that Kevin said. But the main thing that Kevin said, and I'll go through these, but the main thing he said is that person is making a survival choice. It is grounded in some version of safety or survival. So we don't understand everyone's personal reason why they might make the decision to be unsheltered, but they have a reason and we need to like listen to them and respect that. Some of the main reasons, though, that we'll go through here, once again, shout out to Kevin, are shelters are divided by gender. So if you're in a primary relationship with someone who is of the opposite gender, you would have to separate. A lot of people don't want to do that. That's their family. Shelters don't allow pets. Once again, that's a significant relationship in a lot of people's lives. And you don't want to go to a shelter without your pet. Oftentimes, you maybe have had a pet 10, 15 years. There's a lot of rules at shelters and they don't always work with our priorities as individuals. Shelters can have restrictive hours, not all, but most shelters have restricted hours and you're not able to come and go as you please. And you're not able to come and go maybe to your job or to the appointments you need to go to. About half of all people experiencing homelessness have some sort of formal earnings in the year of their experience of homelessness. So people are working. You work a night shift, maybe you can't get into shelter, depending on where you're at. Ability to stay close to your valued belongings. Maybe you've been displaced from your home, and every photo album you have, everything that's ever been important to you, you have in your car, you have in a cart, you have wherever you have it. To go to shelter, you can't bring all that stuff. There isn't enough space for everyone plus all their stuff. So that's a reason that people would choose not to go. Some people might have anxiety. They might have traumatic responses to a large, loud, crowded space. That's a lot for a lot of people, and it may not be something that feels safe to them. One bad previous experience can impact your willingness to go. Anybody can understand that, on whether it's a restaurant you went to or any sort of thing. You took the bus once and it wasn't good. People make decisions all the time. That's how people make decisions. It's not always the most logical thing. It's a personal thing. And that completely makes sense, that you would just have gone to shelter once, had a terrible time, and you won't go again. Accessibility issues, not only just like physical accessibility, but also like people who are on oxygen can be an issue in shelters. There's just a lot of reasons why a shelter isn't really made well for everyone. And I know we have clients who talk about, just the bedding, the way that you sleep can be really difficult, but also more profound things. Geography. Shelters are not necessarily in your neighborhood. You've lived in a neighborhood 10, 20 years. You have to go to a weird part of town you don't know and stay with strange people in a strange large room. And you have to get to that part of town, and that's not your part of town, right? Or even your town, you might have to go to Denver from an outlying area. Street libertarianism. This is just, I got it. I got me. I've got it figured out. I don't need help, right? And people aren't required to take that type of help that organizations want to give them. Micro societies, relationship networks, and responsibilities to each other. If you're in a group of 6 people, you take care of each other. You have tents together, and one person doesn't want to go, that might stop you from going, because that's your community, right? And then every individual is different. This is just a series of answers that our department has learned, our outreach department has learned over the years, but many others. And I think I just saw systemic racism in some organizations pop up, and that is absolutely correct. There are a lot of reasons that people would choose to be unsheltered, and I'm sure our experts who work directly in this will have more answers as we move forward. Andrew, will you go to the next one? Thank you. Just thinking about what are the dangers of being unsheltered, we want to talk through those, because what the people who are joining us tonight are doing is they're putting together safe spaces for people who are unsheltered. And the reason we need that is that it's incredibly unsafe to be unsheltered. There's a lot of anti-homelessness ordinances in Colorado, which means you're 11 times more likely to be arrested if you are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. There's sweeps in a lot of places, and those result in confiscated or lost personal property, severe sleep deprivation, injury from exposure. Maybe someone loses access to what they were going to be doing because they've gotten everything disrupted. And then there was recently just in the last week, there was a new report out that essentially involuntary displacement of people experiencing homelessness can cause significant spikes in mortality, overdoses, and hospitalizations. And so essentially it's literally kills people to displace them. And that is something that happens a lot, is that displacement if you're camping in, say, a park or on private property. All right, and then next slide. All right, so it's finally time to introduce our panelists today. So I'm just gonna read a brief little intro on each person and what they do, and then we'll go ahead and start our conversation. So first we have Linda Berenger, who I think wins the best photo prize. Linda serves as program developer for the Colorado Safe Parking Initiative. SCPI is a citizen-led initiative to encourage safe, legal parking locations for individuals and families experiencing homelessness who are living in vehicles in Colorado's Front Range communities. Colorado Safe Parking Initiative, as of 2022, operates 12 safe lots in 5 of the 7 Denver metro counties, serving 116 households per night. And that could be updated, and I'm sure as we get going, Linda may have more facts for me. So welcome, Linda. We also tonight have Quika Montoya and Hamilton Nikoloff for the Safe Outdoor Spaces program of the Colorado Village Collaborative. Safe outdoor spaces are healthy, secure, staffed, resource, and service-rich environments that provide an outdoor, individualized sheltering option for people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in Denver. The first 2 safe outdoor spaces successfully operated in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood from December 2020 until May 2021. Since then, CVC has operated SOS locations in the Park Hill, La Alma Lincoln Park, Clayton, Barnum, and Regis University neighborhoods. Quika serves as the program director for Safe Outdoor Space, and Hamilton serves as peer program manager. So welcome, Quika and Hamilton. And finally, we have Keisha Miller, who's a member of the outreach team for the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless's Department of Outreach, Engagement, and Services, also known as DOES. DOES offers a safe and trustworthy first point of contact for people experiencing homelessness to navigate and access services related to housing, healthcare, and support services. The outreach team engages in direct outreach on the streets and includes the strategic outreach to large encampments, or SOUL team, and the street medicine team. They are a part of the larger Denver Street Outreach Collaborative, DSOC, which spans across multiple organizations and aims to provide comprehensive care and assistance to unhoused individuals and families across Denver. The outreach team's mission is to bring services, medical care, case management, and housing navigation to those experiencing homelessness who are too vulnerable to seek these services in a traditional way. So welcome, Keisha. And Andrew, if you could stop sharing and we'll just go to kind of a panel format. Thank you so much. And thank you once again for jumping in on that. So as always, we like to start with just a question after we do our data review. Is there anything we missed in the data, or is there anything that surprised you? And that question's for anyone.
I would just add, you didn't really go into this area, but the Colorado Safe Parking Initiative estimates that on any given night in the Denver metro area, there's 1,000 people sleeping in their vehicles. So that it's only been recently, the last 2 years, I believe, that the point in time count actually separated out people in their vehicles. So we are getting data, but last year alone, we had over 2,000 calls for assistance for people sleeping in their vehicles. So it wasn't really surprising from the data, but it was missing in essence. But I also wanted to confirm our folks, about 25% are seniors. when we're talking about the reasons people don't stay in shelters, about 25% are seniors, about 40% have pets. It's a huge reason people are in their vehicles. About 50% have a disability, and quite a few are a part of a couple. So those reasons are validated in the safe parking demographics.
And if go ahead.
I would just, I know, right? I would just second what Linda said. I mean, yeah, there are some very prominent reasons why folks are seeking alternatives to shelter. And it's always so, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but just to see the vast difference between, different tools to capture this data, and like the point in time we see, consistently that huge gap, right? Like we do our best efforts and it's such a big production, and the coalition does a huge role in collecting that data. But it's also just shows you, like, there's so much that's missing from the point in time, and to see those numbers, I mean, it's not surprising, but surprising, if that makes any sense.
And if I might add, with the demographic of people sleeping in their vehicles, I think people have like a stereotypical idea of who is experiencing homelessness and whatnot. And in recent experience, I met a DPS, Denver Public School teacher, sleeping in her car at the time. So there's not like a singular demographic that's kind of experiencing these things.
All right, thank you so much for that. So next question, urban camping has been debated in Denver for several years, with some pushing for criminalization for outdoor camping, or arguing that because someone chooses not to go to a shelter, they shouldn't receive services. What do you say to those people?
Personally, I think that arguing that someone who doesn't access shelter should not receive services is just entirely nonsensical. The reason why people don't access the traditional congregate shelter systems is entirely unrelated from the services that folks need to lift themselves out of homelessness.
And I just,
like-
it's really unfortunate that the mass crisis of homelessness has become such a politicized topic when it's really a human crisis, that our systems over decades have built this crisis, the affordable housing and the cost of living versus the wage increase is just a dramatic gap. I mean, there's so many data points to point to that shows that this is not a moral failing. There isn't just a mass number of individuals all going, yeah, we messed up. It's like there are serious systems that have been operating in this kind of cog system for decades and decades that have created this mass crisis. And so it's so unfortunate that instead of really funneling funding into solving the problem, which is we need more housing and different types of housing for different income brackets, and instead we're still kind of moral judgment. You're bad because you're sleeping outside and we don't want to see it, and it's just like we really need to focus on shifting that narrative. And can I just say I appreciate the coalition for putting together education series, because I mean we really need to start changing the conversation on a national level, statewide level, and then down to local governments and kind of niche markets. But yeah, I'll get off my little soapbox there, but it's politicizing and using these aggressive ways of criminalizing a crisis that was out of these people's hands is just so detrimental and deadly.
Yeah, I had a personal client who his life just kind of fell apart in 6 months, and a lot of it had to do with some medical bills that he was trying to stay on top of, and he ultimately lost his housing. He explored the option of the traditional congregate shelter model, and he lasted 2 days before he had the first mental breakdown of his entire life. So for him, it was a survival choice to not stay in the traditional shelter system. And at the same time, those of us that work in the industry know that, for example, the Department of Human Services is 3 months behind, if not more, on recertifying folks' food stamps. And just to make the argument that because someone doesn't want to access traditional shelters for whatever personal reason they've chosen to not, means that they should just never have their food stamps turned back on is just ludicrous to me.
Well, and a lot of the
in the safe,
Go ahead, Linda.
I was just gonna say, in the safe parking world, we consider the fact that people are in a vehicle as an asset, and that they are, so we honor meeting them where they are, because the next step without the vehicle is sleeping on the street, so we kind of feel like we're trying to hold them at a level of survival that's a little easier, say, a little more comfortable, a little definitely better able to access resources and things if you have a vehicle. So we think that's a valuable asset to a household, and so we would not punish them for not going into shelter because they've retained an asset and we can make use of it,
Well, and a lot of the very services that people, require are part and parcel for their fear for entering into, a shelter environment, such as like with our elderly population, like healthcare is going to be huge, right? And things like, incontinence, which is statistically shown to increase in the population experiencing homelessness with lack of access to healthcare, is actually presented as a barrier to entering into shelter systems, because a lot of shelter systems are not prepared to deal with incontinence. And so like it creates this cycle. If you're not helping them with access to healthcare, then they're not gonna, and so it just keeps going back and forth. Same with mental, anything considered a mental disorder and whatnot. Like, if you have someone that's on the scale of schizoaffective or anything like that, there's going to be a fear or reluctance to enter into a shelter environment. And they're the very people that need those services.
Systems are also constantly changing. They're very difficult to navigate. It's part of the reason why we do the work that we do at the coalition. So much of it revolves around keeping up with these different services, figuring out how to navigate them, and then communicating that to our clients and helping them and assisting them in navigating them. Most services, in order to access them, you have to have at least one, if not multiple, forms of identification. And sometimes staying in a shelter overnight means that those forms of identification get stolen from you. Now you have to wait 2 weeks to a month to get a new ID, a new social security card, a month or longer to get a new birth certificate, just to access those services.
Yeah, and I'll just share a personal kind of, so I had, we recently served two brothers. Both the brothers identified as self-identified with mental health struggles. So they took care of each other, and they would play this game of trying to get into the shelter at the same time when there's a lottery system. So one brother would get selected, the other brother wouldn't. And so they stopped trying to play that lottery and chose to sleep outside. And, you know, I'm happy to say that those people successfully entered our SOS program and are now in a 2-bedroom apartment. Yeah.
And you know, I'd say it's oftentimes our most vulnerable people who are not accessing these shelters. You know, the you know, a lot of times in my experience in the work and the people I speak to, you know, the LGBTQIA plus population is reluctant to enter into the shelter environment because of everything from sexual harassment to just outright, you know, stereotypical, you know, harassment. And it's, you know, again, and there's like a staggering number of LGBTQIA youth experiencing homelessness. And again, these are the very people that need the services that you know, for mental health, for everything, you know, and it's just, yeah.
I personally have a lot of female clients. I tend to gravitate towards working with unhoused women, and the majority of them are in some sort of domestic partnership with a male presenting partner out of safety, out of a sense of security. And we don't have co-ed shelters in Denver. So it's going into a traditional shelter for the night means separating from your partner, which means you spend the entire next day or the entire morning, the next morning, trying to find your partner again, getting back together with them, and then moving on with your day. And if you've got a medical appointment or an appointment at the Social Security office to try to get benefits or anything like that, and you have to spend such a chunk of your day just reuniting with your security system, your support system, I mean, how impossible is it to get anything done?
Keisha, and thanks everyone. On a similar note, you know, one of the major elements of these models for safe outdoor spaces and safe parking is that they're more than safe places, they're support services. So everyone here was talking a lot about support services. So maybe let's start with Linda and then go to Kwika. Can you tell us about some of the support services that are available through your organizations when people come to you for staying?
The support services that are available at the safe parking lots, it begins at the location, because all but 2 of our locations are located in church parking lots, operated by volunteers from the location. So those volunteers provide, they act like host, you know, to people. They welcome people, they treat them like guests. They offer socialization if people are interested. A lot of the churches serve meals, they offer showers, and some general just support along the way. But see, in addition to that, CSPI has case managers that are available at every lot. Case management is voluntary, but it's offered to people who are in need of it. And through that case management, or in addition to it, we are often doing car repairs, paying for car insurance, registration, paying for storage units, IDs, driver's license, a lot of vehicle related things. We put people in motels in severe weather if they're participants in the safe lot. And all those things I named, the car repairs and all that, are for people who are participating in the safe lot. And right now there's 13 safe lots in the Denver metro area. Yeah. And let's see. And then we have partner services with, for example, in Jefferson County, we have a Foothills Animal Shelter that offers vaccinations, pet foods and supplies, and respite care. Like if someone goes in the hospital, they'll take care of a Safe Parkers pet while they're unable to care for them. We have Stride Medical who comes to the lots. We have Jefferson Center for Mental Health comes to the lots. We have health department comes in and does different things, Narcan trainings, and did COVID vaccinations and flu vaccinations. So those were mostly examples from Jefferson County, but we have partners in every county that come to the lots and offer services. So we're lucky.
That's amazing. Was I next on that queue, Alexis? Okay, great. How we designed the safe outdoor space. So I'm truly honored to be in this role, but I was hired because I have experienced and recovered from life challenges, including unsheltered homelessness, mental health, substance misuse, and criminal justice. Kind of has that all-in-one package out there. But it took 3 different organizations to help connect with me to help solve my housing crisis. So I knew I wanted to bring that into the safe outdoor space. So I wanted to leverage the existing community resources that are already doing great work in the community. So one of the first person I tapped was actually Kevin Raleigh over at CCH. Because of the Denver Street Outreach Collaborative. So we have a lot of partnerships that provide a variety of services. So we have the basic resources of, bathrooms, showers, laundry, hand washing sinks, some of those basic resources and supplies that we have on site. And then we also have case management services that come in from either outreach workers or case managers from the Coalition or St. Francis Center or Urban Peak. We also have healthcare services provided by none other than the Stout Street Health Clinic, and they bring their doctors and nurses, behavioral health clinicians, and we have a mobile dentist that comes to the site. We also provide peer support services. So we have in-house peer support program. Hamilton, woohoo, is our newly minted peer support manager as we've expanded our peer support services. And but we also partner with organizations like Servicios de la Raza that have peer support services that opens up another connection to community. And then we also partner with the Denver Animal Shelter and the Street Dog Coalition to provide care for our a plethora of pets at the SOSs. And let's see, am I missing anything? I would say that covers the types of, and then of course, things like veteran services or more niche type populations. We recently partnered with Colorado Artists in Recovery that bring art workshops into the space. So we kind of meet people where they're at and we move and shake and bring new partners on. But basically just providing as many connections into the community as possible, because we all know that it's about connection rather than the isolation that they're used to experiencing living outside, even when they have, like street families and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Hamilton. I was just about to ask you to share more about like how peer support might be like a specific type of support that's really valuable to folks.
Yeah, and just real quick, I don't know if Quika mentioned, but like we work with partners who assist in like career training and whatnot. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the big ones, is that like we just recently partnered with an organization that teaches solar panel installation and whatnot. And so it's a booming industry. So we're kind of getting people a foot in the door for something that can take them wherever they want. In terms of peer support, I think the most critical thing that we do in the long run is we help that return to humanity. If a lot of our community members, a lot of the population, they've been let down, they've been ostracized, they've been stigmatized, all of the ized. And our primary role is just to remind them that what they are experiencing is valid, and that we are here, that we see past whatever they've been experiencing, and in fact that their humanity is beautiful, and that we are here to love them and to support them in I think the way that we frame it is we're their cheerleaders, right? We're there to say, I get it, that I'm sorry, and what would we like to do, right? And what you want to do is entirely valid, right? We're not here to steer the ship. I often say we're just there to support them in whatever mission it is that they have. I'll tell my community members all the time. I said, what is your dream and how can I help you get there?
Awesome. Keisha, as someone who does outreach for the coalition, like tell us more about your experiences of outreaching to folks, whether they're, part of these alternatives to shelter or just generally like unsheltered and sheltered folks.
One of the biggest differences is that all the things that are offered in these safe parking spaces and the SOS sites, shelters just don't have the means to provide this. And that's not at the fault of the shelters. A lot of our shelters in Denver do a lot more than is necessary for not that necessary, it is necessary, that's why they do it, but then what a traditional congregate shelter functions as in a society. But even with that being said, it's kind of like the story Kuika was sharing with the two brothers trying to get into the lottery for the shelter on 48th Street and not being able to both spend the night there or hold down a bed there for multiple nights in a row. So having a client who's staying at an SOS camp versus in a shelter just makes everything move so much more smoothly, so much more consistently. Surviving on the streets is a full-time job. And when you take away some of the stresses of figuring out where you're going to sleep at night, where are you going to store your things, how are you going to feed your pet, how are you going to find meals for yourself, where are you going to, how are you going to maintain your relationship with your partner? When you take away those stresses, you allow a person to engage in their own healing and advocate for themselves to get into housing and work on that. And like you shared at the beginning of this presentation with the data, most subsidized housing wait lists are 2 to 3 years long. So spending 2 to 3 years of every single day figuring out where you're going to sleep at night, where you're going to store your belongings, how are you going to keep everything from getting stolen, where are you going to find your health care, and solving all those problems for a person allows them to engage in this process so much faster. If I get mail or news regarding a client with a housing opportunity, I don't have to hunt them down. I know what tent they're at an SOS. I know what parking spot they're at a safe parking space, versus trying to navigate and popping by all the shelters and asking folks I know that work there, like, hey, have you seen this person in a while? Have you seen this person in a while? No, they're sleeping on the streets. Well, this person says they're on this cross street. Now I've spent, a week trying to find this person and the housing opportunity may have passed. So that's one of the most significant differences between working with someone who is in the SOS program and someone who is unsheltered and just, they're too busy surviving to engage in the difficult process of navigating housing.
Mic drop, Keisha.
And I'd say that, there's an interesting metric that just came out that when the DHA does their lottery, they choose 1,000 vouchers. Of those 1,000 vouchers, it's only like 450 vouchers that actually land in the hands of the person who is intended, because of those very barriers finding the person.
Wow, thank you, Hamilton. So most of these shelter alternatives are in the Denver metro area. If someone on this webinar, someone watching this later, someone who's in politics, has concerns about these sites in their neighborhoods, how would you respond to that for either of the sites and for anyone to answer?
I would say engaging the community is such an important step. And I don't think that there's a perfect way to do it. I don't think with any type of project, honestly, affordable, it doesn't matter if it's affordable housing or transitional or sober living, or if it's safe parking or safe outdoor space, if it's something different other than the norm, I think there's always kind of this level of fear, fear of the unknown, fear of, which comes from a very valid place. So what I like to try to do is combat that fear with facts and data about our program. We were really blessed to have had the Colorado Sun do a deep dive into our SOS data, crime data in the neighborhoods where SOS has existed. And there was a common, an assumption saying, oh, there's increased crime in our neighborhood after an SOS comes. And the data actually showed the opposite. It actually showed a reduction in crime during the times that SOSs were in that particular neighborhood. So what I like to do is educate and answer as many questions as I can. And then we also use tools like a good neighbor agreement, which holds us to a commitment to providing data, a communications pathway for concerns, and kind of use whatever tools we have in our toolbox. And then also just kind of wait and see. More often than not, a neighborhood will go, oh my gosh, this is totally different than what I thought it was. And you can't even tell it's there, which is more common after we move in. So unfortunately, we got to get through that loudness, start operating, and then we get some of that relief where it's like, okay, so now they see, and this feels a lot better.
I would just add to that we have the same resistance when we're opening a safe parking lot, but as SOS does, but one of the ways we sell the program, for lack of a better word, is to talk about that this is a organized, planned operation. This is not a free-for-all party event going on for weeks. It is not. It is controlled, and there's some attempts, not some attempts, there are plans to deal with trash, to deal with sanitation, to deal with incidents of violence. All those things are in place. So that's one of the facts, you might say, that I offer to people, but also I also remind people that people are living in their neighborhoods already. They're in their cars and they're sleeping in their neighborhoods. And so this is a way to embrace them as part of their community, in a humane way, with the intention of hopefully improving some lives, by addressing health issues and other things. So that those are some of the words that I use. But also, just like Kwika said, we have statistics showing that crime in the areas where the safe parking lots actually goes down, because the safe parkers are seeking safety. That's why they're in the safe parking lots. So they are the watchdogs on the neighborhood. And so a lot of our locations, the safe parkers have reported to the say the church or the whatever building is there, things that are going on at night that they were unaware of, that vandalism to their church and stuff. And so these safe parkers have been assets in keeping the crime in the neighborhood actually down. We have one church in Arvada that had a church van, and 2 times the catalytic converter was stolen, till they figured out, well, let's move it in the back over to where the safe parking lot is, move it near there, and no longer are they getting their catalytic converter stolen. So it is true that it actually brings crime down. And we have several safe lots that are located at where schools are on the property, and that's always a huge pushback from the community. Oh my God, putting homeless people near children, and it just has not proved to be an issue in any way at any of the lots that have schools on the property.
One of my
I would say, I would, oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Keisha.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna add and agree with Linda and say, there is something very powerful about not having this resource and then having this resource and the ownership that it elicits in the community members that stay at these different resources, because this is their home. And they take pride, they take ownership. A lot of our community members participate in neighborhood cleanup, and they don't want anything bad to happen because they don't want this resource to go away. Thank you, Keisha, go ahead.
I was going to say something similar. It's amazing what happens when you dignify a human being's right to occupy a space. The thing that I love the most about the SOSs is that it allows a lot of clients that I've worked with to sort of have a warm up into what living in a community in an apartment complex in a neighborhood is going to feel like and look like. And it allows them to have some time to disengage this fight or flight that they've been stuck in for a time, out of survival, out of like the sheer need to just survive when they've been unsheltered on the streets. And it allows them to practice being a good neighbor and learn what that looks like and feels like and what the benefits of that are. And that allows them to be so much more successful when they do move into, you know, their first apartment or house.
Thank you all. So the opportunities we've been talking about today are primarily in Denver metro area. Do you know of resources outside of Denver metro or have suggestions for folks on this call who may be interested in implementing similar spaces in their own communities? And I'll start with Linda, because I think I saw something in the chat about someone trying to get one in Northern Colorado that had talked to you. So we'll start with you, Linda.
Yep. Yeah, we are working right now. We're in Adams County, Broomfield County, Jefferson County, Denver County, and Aurora, Arapahoe County. We are not in Douglas County and we are not in Boulder County. But we are working with people in Loveland and Fort Collins. We are working with people in Colorado Springs. We've had calls from Greeley, Weld County. So, I mean, in a grand mission of Colorado Safe Parking Initiative, we would like to have safe parking lots all up and down the Front Range. You know, we haven't quite figured out the funding or the capacity to do that, but that's a vision, you know. So we are actively providing technical assistance and support to people wanting to start safe lots in other locations in Colorado.
Yeah, I would say it's very similar to Linda. Early on, I mean, I think we were maybe the fourth city during the pandemic that launched something like this. And so we definitely got a flood of municipalities kind of all over the United States, but here locally. So we sent our toolkit. So Aurora opened theirs. We've sent it along to other municipalities in the Metro Denver region. I know Boulder's very interested in opening something. I heard Loveland just opened up a safe space. It's more of a congregate type outdoor setting rather than individualized sheltering system. But people are seeing the value in providing that dignity that people deserve for the right now, because there is no magic wand, even with unlimited dollars, that would create housing to address the crisis that we have. So I'm all about giving people the tools that they need to open or utilize kind of our toolkit of opening in their municipalities. So we always want to share, because honestly, the more options like this, the better, because every human deserves a safe place to lay their head, and bathrooms and showers and food and
I wanted to add in a fun stat that it costs any given state somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 to house a person in a jail for a year. The SOSs operate at about $10,000 a person per year. So
hey, that's a great fact. I love that, Keisha.
Awesome. Well, I see we have quite a few questions in the Q&A, so I want to move to there. So one of the first questions we have is what kind of experiences have these people with these programs had with the STAR program? Are there frequent interactions? Are they good or bad? And I think Hamilton, I'll start with you on that one. And can you also give an overview of what the STAR program is for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, so the STAR program was started by a group in town called Dasher, and STAR was an attempt to kind of subvert the police response to things like mental health crisis. And the idea behind STAR is that instead of calling the police, many of our community members and many people in the unhoused population especially have police trauma. And as we know in kind of recent years, there's been kind of escalation as a result of police presence. So STAR was a response to that, to respond to these sorts of situations with social workers or the like. Our personal experience with them, unfortunately, oftentimes they seem to be a little overburdened, in the sense that when we have a community member experiencing a mental health crisis, it's kind of like hey, we call them, we need a response pretty immediately. And it could take them up to, sometimes 3-4 hours to even respond. There's been some conflict recently between the creators of the program and the way that the city is operating it, in the sense that the city is trying to switch it into a co-responder model, which means that that the police show up with STAR, or STAR shows up behind the police. In our experience, oftentimes before we knew that this was really happening, we would call STAR and the police would show up first. And then sometimes the STAR wouldn't even show up. And so there's a little bit of a conflict there. Again, in things like a mental health crisis, you know, the police are oftentimes not very helpful in those sort of situations. You know, most of the time they're very nice people, but they just don't know how to respond. They're not the most efficient in de-escalation techniques, and that's really what we're seeking in those services. So we haven't had a very good experience on our end with them. I do appreciate the attempt, but I think it needs an overhaul in terms of its overall model.
I would counter that just a little bit. We have had some great experiences with STAR. And they've worked with us very closely on a couple of specific situations that I'm thinking of, where they followed back up. They, you know, came to check on them after the fact. So I think while we've had some common experiences, but we've had some great ones as well.
I would echo Hamilton's original point that they seem to just be overburdened. Like most things, there's just not enough resources for the amount of people that need them. And I think the theory is great, and I think that they do their best. And they, like Quika said, there have been experiences with them, but they are very overburdened.
The last time I spoke with someone from STAR, they said during that day, they had 1 STAR vehicle with 2 employees for all Denver districts at the time.
Yeah, I think it's like with all of, you know, obviously 3 sites serving around 150 people a night is a very big job for me, but the need far outweighs what we have. You know, that barely covers 10% of our unsheltered population. And so it's similar to STAR and SOS and safe parking. We drastically need to scale this to even come close to addressing the need. And funding and opportunities seems to always be the barrier right there.
All right, thanks everyone. We have a question from Ben about metrics regarding LGBTQIA+ community members. I will just sort of quickly touch on that. I'm going to put in the chat a report that we have on LGBTQIA folks in homelessness. In general, youth are a big, I believe it's LGBTQ plus youth are 120% more likely to experience homelessness than their cisgender peers. It's also really specifically transgender folks have a lot of issues with homelessness due to marginalization. And if you look, last June, we did a session on transgender folks specifically in homelessness. So I would check out that report, and I would check out that session that we did last year, which should be up on YouTube. I have a question from Johanna, sorry about the pronunciation, regarding what are some strategies for discussing urban camping sweeps with people who live in neighborhoods and large encampments. It sounds like everyone here has had those conversations in the neighborhoods. So how do you do those conversations? Sorry, it just disappeared. It got marked as answered. Yes. And what kinds of things should we, the people who understand the reasons behind remaining unsheltered, say to those who do not? Like, what are your go-to conversations with people who maybe don't think that these alternatives are a good idea?
I usually just try to combat it with facts. That's what I do. So I talk about the gaps in our sheltering system. I talk about the variety of reasons that people cannot access shelter. And then usually by the time I'm done listing off all of those, they kind of have a bit, the wide eyes go, oh, I didn't realize all of that. So I think, you know, unfortunately as a society today, it's easy to put a label on something and put it on the shelf, right? So we don't have to think about it. But I think the more we talk about it, the more we talk about the nuances, the more we talk about the individual experience and centering that is the best way to combat that. So facts and data are usually the best way I can combat that or have that conversation.
To answer Johanna's question in the chat, to follow up, I have people ask me all the time how they can get into an SOS site. It's kind of the same issue that we touched on earlier, that there's just not enough resources for the amount of people that want to access them. Most people in the large encampments would love to move into an SOS and then transition into housing. Most people are not opting into that lifestyle choice.
And then can I say, ultimately, on top of jointly with Keisha, is 4 walls is the solution to end homelessness, but that doesn't mean that people don't deserve a right now solution to take care of their basic needs and give them dignity.
You know, one of the things that I like to mention, especially to my more conservative friends and people and anyone in this kind of conversation, is kind of what Keisha talked about, is the overall just tax burden, right? In an unaddressed situation, you know, the tax burden grows exponentially in terms of access to emergency services, stuff like that. She had mentioned the $20,000 to $30,000 per individual. You know, and the statistics just show that like that tax burden on it just drastically decreases if you provide someone the supportive services that they need for, you know, a year or two, you know, and so like that argument tends to be, oh, okay, you know, because they're, you know, the conservative aisle likes that tax conversation, so it tends to work.
Just a fun anecdotal piece to that. That's such a great point, Hamilton. It's like I've always wanted to like add up my journey with over 14 hospital stays, probably 10 longer stays in jail, and then a wonderful experience with the Colorado Coalition Transitional Program called the Roof Global Program. And then I transitioned into my subsidized apartment, and I recently graduated from that program. And when you think about somebody's potential that we are not tapping into because they're desperately surviving on the street, and we've got, you know, thousands of individual unique experiences that can be a member of our society if we just stopped and took care of them for a moment.
And to highlight that, that's another thing I'll definitely bring up, is that like some of the most beautiful, thoughtful, creative people I know are within the unhoused population. And I think that we are doing a just disservice and in fact, a grave injustice by not giving people the opportunity to thrive, because, you know, overall, I believe our whole country would thrive if we gave these people the opportunity. And, you know, like, again, some of the most beautiful artists I've seen and poets have come out of this population. So it's just a shame at the end of the day.
You know, in the 1940s, Eleanor Roosevelt hosted all of the world leaders to create what is now essentially the United Nations. And they created this declaration of human rights, of basic human rights. And every person there agreed that housing is a basic human right.
Thank you. And I'll just, in addition to what Vika said, I've been saying this sometimes when I do presentations, and you know, it's very data heavy. It's like the first 5 minutes, but the whole time. And I'm like, you know, there's two sides to this, but the data is it's pretty much all on one side. And people who are going to be arguing the other way, the truth is, you know, as Hamilton was saying, you know, there's a cost to the community, not only to the individuals experiencing homelessness, but to us as taxpayers and to the community, to not serve people and not help people and not get people into housing. And so, you know, every study, every fact is going to kind of show that, you know, housing first works, that people are, it's better to give people services than to have emergency response services. And I think it's really amazing when we all come together and talk about how that hits on like a personal level and with individual clients, but also just when you look at it at large.
There's an interesting statistic on that demonstrates that 80% of the time when you support someone and help them to thrive, that 80% of the time they turn around and they support their community and the unhoused population.
Hey,
So it creates this cyclical model. The more that you support people, the more support that's available. And that's like, as Quika said, there's not a quick fix, but one of the things that will really help drag us out of that is the more people we support, the more people are supporting.
Yeah. There's one question in the chat from David Heitz about Denver's proposed clunker law and what that could do to the unsheltered population. So the idea would be to like tow away vehicles that are clunkers. And I see that my colleague Aubrey, who works in legislative matters and advocacy, sort of had a response in there. But Linda, is this on your radar at all, or something that comes up already when you're working with folks in their cars?
It's not so much on our radar because one of the requirements that the Safe Parking Initiative has is that you have to be able to drive your car into the lots. But what we do have to deal with is cars that break down in the lots. So we, that's been a huge challenge, a little bit surprising to us, which is a mistake on our part. I mean, like, why we didn't think about that, what we were going to do. And so it's a really awful day when we have to ask someone to leave the safe lot because they don't have an operating vehicle. And so we do what we can to repair the vehicles, but sometimes they're unrepairable. So not directly related to the clunker law, but I do know of a program in California that it's a safe parking program, but they haul the clunkers to a parking lot and people can stay in the lot in the clunkers. So that's another possible model of a safe parking program that utilizes broken down cars as a form of shelter.
it really just, I wasn't aware of this clunker law, but it does just feel like another way to criminalize homelessness and poverty. It's just like another way to say, oh, we don't want to see it, because that means that we have to focus on it as a society. And like I said before, it's easy to put a label on something and shelf it and never look at it again. And this is just another one of those ways that people are using laws to attack poverty, which again was not created by the individual. It was created by a massive system.
Well, and this I think the scary thing is that the people that are opposing these sorts of programs, the safe shelters and whatnot, when you listen to them discuss what their plans might be, oftentimes it's like bordering in the realm of authoritarianism, where they want to build these kind of institutions and whatnot, and in essence, against the will of these people, round them up and ship them off to outside of the city to get the treatment that they need, quote unquote. And that's the sort of stuff that scares me.
Just on a side note, I see in the chat that someone said we need a lot for RVs, and boy, do we need lots with the S for RVs. And right now we have CSPI has 2 in Broomfield, and we're working on potentially 1 or 2 in Denver. There are places that we could use to park RVs. It's just a matter of getting the powers that be to let loose of those places, so that we could do some RV lots. The challenge with RV lots, though, they require a slightly different model than CSPI, because I don't know if you're familiar, but CSPI vehicles leave in the morning. They come in at night and leave in the morning. With RVs, that's not an easy thing to do. And people choose not to come in the safe lot because they'd rather take their park somewhere for 2 weeks till they get kicked out and move on. That's an easier solution for them. So we have to come up with a different model version of what we're doing and find some locations. So if you know of any that would make good RV lots, let me know. Or vehicle lots, either one.
Well, thank you so much. I want to have time for one question before we do our very quick wrap up. So my question is, what can people do to help for your organizations? Like, I was really interested, Linda, in you talking about, the need to start cars and work on cars. Maybe if someone is a mechanic, or, there may be some ways in which people can help that are a little atypical outside of what we usually recommend, advocacy, donations to our organizations. I'm not saying those things aren't great. I think everyone here can join our advocacy network. Everyone here can donate to one of the organizations on this call. Are there any other like volunteer opportunities or ways to help, you know, advocate in your neighborhood or make changes that you all would recommend that would be useful to your organizations that maybe we wouldn't normally think of.
Definitely
I would,
the
oh, go ahead.
definitely the mechanic connection and towing, vehicle towing, would be, we've been on the search for a couple years now for a good partnership around towing. CSPI also has volunteer opportunities though, to answer our crisis line, which I mentioned had over 2,000 calls last year. People in vehicles asking for help. So we're looking for volunteers for that line. So
Yeah, I always say arm yourself with facts, so that you can stand ready to have a conversation when you hear something that doesn't sound right about somebody maybe misquoting or stigmatizing these communities that we work with. And then I would say we have a ton of different volunteer opportunities at Colorado Village Collaborative. We have some basic ones like just site help on site. You could spend time helping each site out. You can hang out and meet the folks. They always love getting to know our volunteers. And then I always say, I love honoring volunteers for whatever gift they have to give. I've gotten really creative with some of our volunteers. We've done book clubs. I've had a podiatrist come on site. If you have a unique skill set and you're wondering if it can be used, you know, visit our website and open up a conversation. We love to honor volunteers for how they want to give.
I like to remind folks that kindness is an endless resource that we all have. Being kind to folks that are experiencing homelessness, to kind of counteract the way that they're treated day in and day out by the rest of society. Lead by example for your neighbors. That's one of the biggest forms of advocacy that you can have.
And I'll add, like, you know, one thing that I find is just anything that really adds to that humanizing experience, right? Anything that just promotes the validity of their experience, and that, like, no matter what no matter where you are worthy of love, right? You are worthy of kindness. You are worthy of the generosity of society. And you know, we recently reached out to, like, Meow Wolf, for example. We're trying to get our residents into Meow Wolf, and they were gracious enough to gift us like 16 tickets to Meow Wolf. Things like that are huge, right? If you have spare tickets to a ball game, right? We would love things like that, because these are things that, you know, the housed population doesn't think of oftentimes as something that may be missed in an unhoused situation. And, you know, I can think of 3, you know, off the top of my head, residents that just loved ball games, and they haven't been in, you know, to a Donkos game in like 10 years. And it's, you know, anything little like that, you know, whatever you come across.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that info. I'll mention that in the chat, Aubrey put some information about that clunker law. So if anyone's curious, it's in there. I'll also mention that we're going to send a follow-up email tomorrow to everyone, once again, with the slideshow, with contact information for the folks who are on this and their website, so that you can reach out to them if you want to follow up, and with the recording. So please do engage with that, so that, you know, if you want to take next steps, you know how to do so with whichever organization feels good to you. So that's it for this month. Join us next month. We're doing a legislative wrap, so you're going to find out all about what got passed this year, and maybe some stuff that didn't, but hopefully some good stuff that did pass. That's going to be next May 25th. So usually we do it on the 3rd Thursday of the month. Next month, we're just shifting a little bit. We'll do it on the 4th Thursday of the month. But please sign up and join us. As always, it'll be on Zoom. The registration link should be live, and maybe someone can put it in the chat, but it'll also be in tomorrow's email. And that's it. We're at Colorado Coalition on all the major platforms if you want to reach out to us that way. You can also reach out to anybody on this call. Our emails, you'll see hopefully in our follow-up email. And thank you all for coming. We know that, you know, you choose to spend your evening learning more about homelessness, engaging in ways to help your neighbors. And so, as always, like, thank you so much for valuing that and prioritizing that in your lives and spending this time with us. And thank you to the amazing panelists. Easiest one ever. You all just like had things to say. So really appreciate the conversation, and thank you all.